In the 1930s, Alcatraz Island, known for its notorious federal prison, was a place of fear and despair. Among its many inmates, one name stood out: Al Capone, the infamous gangster. But the story isn't about him directly. It's about a lesser-known but deeply unsettling event that occurred on the island, involving a guard named Clarence. Clarence was a seasoned prison guard, having worked at various facilities before being assigned to Alcatraz. The prison was notorious not just for its hardened criminals but also for its oppressive atmosphere. Some staff members claimed that the island had a life of its own, with whispers of paranormal activity and ghostly sightings. One evening in 1937, Clarence was doing his routine patrol. The prison was eerily quiet, save for the distant sound of the waves crashing against the rocky shore. As he walked through the cold, dimly lit hallways, he noticed a strange chill in the air, unusual for the summer months. He passed by the solitary confinement cells, each one a dark, oppressive box where inmates spent their days in near-total isolation. As he approached one of the cells, he heard something that made him stop in his tracks. A faint, sorrowful whisper. The voice seemed to come from the cell itself, though there was no one inside. Clarence took a deep breath and tried to shake off the unnerving feeling. But as he continued his rounds, he couldn't shake the sense that he was being watched. He felt eyes on him from the shadows, but every time he turned, there was nothing there. A few days later, Clarence heard unsettling news from a fellow guard. They spoke of a prisoner who had been found dead in his cell, apparently having committed suicide under strange circumstances. The guard mentioned that the prisoner had been found in a sitting position, his face twisted in a look of sheer terror. The story took a darker turn when Clarence discovered that the dead prisoner had been in the very same cell he had patrolled that night. The whispers in the cell were later attributed to the prisoner, whose ghost was said to be trying to communicate his last moments of agony. The rumors of ghostly encounters on Alcatraz only grew after that. Many claimed to see shadowy figures in the prison's old corridors, hear faint cries for help, and experience sudden drops in temperature. Even after Alcatraz was closed as a federal prison in 1963, visitors and staff alike reported eerie phenomena, with some saying they could still feel the presence of those who had suffered there. The prison was turned into a tourist attraction, and while some come for the history, others come for the ghost stories. Those who dare to walk the darkened halls sometimes report seeing figures that vanish when approached or hearing whispers that chill them to their core. The spirit of the prison, it seems, remains very much alive, and the ghosts of Alcatraz continue to haunt the desolate island, a grim reminder of the suffering that once took place within its walls. The haunting of Cell Block D. Years after Clarence's unsettling experience, Alcatraz was officially closed as a federal prison and handed over to the National Park Service. In the late 1960s, the island became a popular tourist destination, attracting people from around the world who were fascinated by its grim history. One of the most infamous areas on the island is Cell Block D, often referred to as the Hole. It was notorious for its extreme isolation and harsh conditions. In the early 1970s, during a routine tour for a group of researchers interested in the paranormal, something inexplicable occurred that would deepen the mystery of Alcatraz. The group, led by Dr. Evelyn Ross, a noted historian with an interest in the supernatural, had obtained special permission to spend the night in Cell Block D. They were equipped with cameras, audio recorders, and other paranormal investigation tools. The team was eager to document any phenomena that might explain the numerous ghost stories associated with the prison. As night fell, the group set up their equipment and began their investigation. The air grew cold, and an unsettling silence enveloped the cell block. First, everything seemed quiet. Then, around midnight, Dr. Ross's recorder picked up something that made her blood run cold. A low, guttural moan that echoed through the cell block, despite there being no one else present. Dr. Ross reviewed the recording with her team and noted a disturbing pattern. The moans seemed to come from different directions, as if multiple voices were trapped within the walls. The researchers, though uneasy, pressed on with their investigation, moving deeper into the cell block. Suddenly, one of the team members, a young historian named Tom, felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned around, expecting to see one of his colleagues, but found no one there. His face turned pale as he described a cold, clammy grip that lingered even after he looked around. The group decided to investigate further and headed to the solitary confinement cells. As they approached, the temperature plummeted noticeably, and their breath became visible in the frigid air. In the darkness, they saw something that defied explanation. Faint, ghostly figures moving in and out of the cells. Dr. Ross attempted to communicate with these apparitions, asking questions and using a spirit box to relay responses. The responses were cryptic, but they seemed to reveal deep anguish and a longing for release. The entities appeared to be the spirits of those who had suffered in the most inhumane conditions, trapped in the remnants of their torment. The most chilling moment occurred when Dr. Ross's camera captured a shadowy figure standing in front of one of the solitary cells. The figure appeared to be a man, dressed in prison garb from the early 1900s. His face was obscured, but his body language conveyed a deep sadness. As the camera clicked, the figure dissipated into the cold, dense air. By the early hours of the morning, the team felt an overwhelming presence, as if the spirits were trying to communicate their torment or perhaps warn of something more sinister. They decided to conclude the investigation, feeling a sense of urgency and dread that they couldn't quite explain. In the following days, the recordings and photographs from that night were analyzed and debated. While some dismissed the evidence as mere anomalies or tricks of light and sound, others were convinced that the phenomena were genuine, supernatural occurrences. The haunting of Alcatraz, particularly Cell Block D, became a central topic of discussion among paranormal enthusiasts. Visitors who tour the prison often report feeling an intense sense of dread, experiencing unexplained cold spots, and seeing shadowy figures out of the corners of their eyes. Alcatraz Island remains a place of fascination and fear, a ghostly reminder of its dark past. The spirits of the prisoners who suffered there continue to be the subject of many investigations and stories, each adding to the island's eerie legacy. The restless souls, it seems, are still searching for a resolution to their suffering, trapped in the cold, unforgiving confines of Alcatraz. The curse of Alcatraz, the midnight visitor. As the 1970s turned into the 1980s, Alcatraz's reputation as a haunted location grew, attracting paranormal investigators and thrill-seekers from around the globe. One of the most intriguing and unsettling accounts came from a group of night tour guides who had worked on the island for several years. Among them was Alex, a seasoned guide who had heard countless ghost stories but had always remained skeptical. That changed one fateful night in 1984. It was a cold, foggy evening, and Alex had just finished leading a night tour through the prison. The last of the visitors had left, and the island was silent once more, save for the distant sound of waves crashing against the rocks. Alex was doing a final check of the premises before locking up for the night. As he walked through the empty corridors of Cell Block D, he noticed something unusual. The temperature had dropped significantly, and the air was filled with an eerie stillness. It was as if the prison itself was holding its breath. He shrugged off the feeling and continued his rounds, his flashlight casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. As he passed the solitary confinement cells, he noticed something strange. The cell doors, which were supposed to be securely locked, were slightly ajar. He approached the first one, intending to close it, but the door creaked open wider as if inviting him in. A shiver ran down Alex's spine, but he forced himself to investigate. Inside the cell, he found nothing but darkness and an old, tattered blanket. As he turned to leave, he heard a soft, mournful sob. The sound was faint but unmistakable, coming from just outside the cell. Alex's flashlight flickered, casting erratic beams of light across the corridor. He followed the sound, which led him to a particularly cold and dark section of the cell block. There, standing near one of the solitary cells, was a figure cloaked in shadow. The figure seemed to be wearing old-fashioned prison garb, and its face was obscured by the dim light. Alex's heart raced. He called out to the figure, but it didn't move or respond. The air grew colder, and the sobbing sound intensified, filling the corridor with an overwhelming sense of despair. As Alex approached cautiously, the figure suddenly turned and began to walk away, moving with an unnatural gliding motion. It led Alex to the far end of the cell block, where the sound of footsteps echoed eerily in the silence. The figure then stopped near a particular cell, and with a sudden, almost theatrical gesture, pointed toward the interior. Inside the cell was a scene that left Alex dumbfounded. There, lying on the floor, was an old rusted shank, a weapon used by prisoners. But what made it chilling was the message scrawled on the wall in what appeared to be blood. Asterisk, they never let us leave. Asterisk. The message seemed to be a final plea from a soul trapped in eternal torment, a reminder of the suffering that had once occurred within these walls. The ghostly figure, now fading into the darkness, seemed to be trying to convey a sense of ongoing anguish and the cruel fate that awaited those who had died in such isolation. Alex backed away, feeling a profound sense of dread. The figure vanished, leaving only the cold, oppressive silence behind. He rushed back to the security office and locked it tight, his mind racing with what he had witnessed. The next morning, Alex reported the incident to his superiors and showed them the recording from his flashlight's camera. Though the footage was shaky and unclear, the message on the wall was undeniably present. The incident was chalked up to a possible prank or a hallucination brought on by fatigue, but Alex knew what he had seen. In the years that followed, stories of the ghostly figure and the cryptic message spread among the staff and visitors. The haunted reputation of Alcatraz grew even darker, as tales of the midnight visitor became part of the island's chilling lore. Visitors who dared to explore Cell Block D at night sometimes report feeling an intense, almost oppressive presence. Some claim to hear the distant sound of sobbing, while others have seen fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures that seem to vanish before they can be fully identified. The ghostly tales of Alcatraz continue to fascinate and terrify those who visit, and the island remains a place where the past and present converge in an unsettling dance. The restless spirits, forever trapped in the harsh confines of the prison, serve as a haunting reminder of the suffering that once permeated the cold, unforgiving walls of Alcatraz. The echoes of Alcatraz, the vanishing crew. In the late 1980s, Alcatraz Island's haunting reputation attracted paranormal investigators and enthusiasts from around the world. Among them was a team of investigators led by Mark Davis, a renowned paranormal researcher known for his rigorous and scientific approach to ghost hunting. The team had heard about the unsettling incidents at Alcatraz and decided to undertake a comprehensive investigation to uncover the truth. Mark and his crew arrived on the island one foggy evening, armed with the latest in ghost hunting technology: infrared cameras, EVP, electronic voice phenomena, recorders, and electromagnetic field detectors. They planned to spend a full night exploring the most notorious locations within the prison, focusing on the solitary confinement cells and the infamous Cell Block D. As night fell, the team set up their equipment and began their investigation. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation and unease. The fog rolled in from the bay, adding to the island's already foreboding ambience. The crew conducted interviews with the night guards and gathered historical data, trying to piece together the stories of the souls who had once suffered within the prison's walls. At around midnight, the team split up to cover more ground. Mark and his colleague, Sarah, headed to the solitary confinement cells, while the rest of the team focused on the cell blocks and the old mess hall. In the solitary confinement cells, Mark and Sarah conducted their EVP sessions, asking questions and waiting for any signs of a response. They recorded strange noises, such as disembodied whispers and unexplained knocks, but nothing definitive. As they reviewed their recordings, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive, and the air seemed to grow colder. Meanwhile, the rest of the team in Cell Block D experienced their own share of eerie phenomena. The electromagnetic field detectors began to spike wildly, and they reported seeing shadowy figures darting in and out of their line of sight. The temperature dropped abruptly, and their breath became visible, despite it being relatively warm outside. As the night wore on, Mark and Sarah decided to join the rest of the crew. They made their way back through the dimly lit corridors, but something felt off. The prison seemed unusually quiet, and an unsettling feeling of being watched crept over them. When they reached the meeting point, the rest of the team was missing. The equipment was still running, but there was no sign of the other investigators. Mark and Sarah frantically searched the area, calling out for their colleagues, but there was no response. After several hours of searching and growing increasingly desperate, Mark and Sarah contacted the authorities. A search party was organized, and the island was combed thoroughly. Despite their efforts, no trace of the missing crew members was found. The next day, as the investigation continued, a troubling discovery was made. In one of the solitary confinement cells, a small, hidden compartment was found behind a loose brick. Inside was an old, weathered journal belonging to a former inmate. The journal contained cryptic entries about the eternal watchers and the souls that never leave. The final entry in the journal was dated just days before the prison closed. It read, *, "They watch us from the dark, their eyes never blinking. We are their prisoners now, bound to these walls like they were. Beware the cold, for it holds them close. *. The mysterious disappearance of Mark's team remained unsolved, and their case became one of the most talked about paranormal events related to Alcatraz. The incident added a new layer to the island's chilling reputation, with many believing that the spirits of the restless inmates had claimed new victims. In the years that followed, visitors to Alcatraz continued to report strange occurrences. Some claimed to hear the faint sound of footsteps echoing through the cell blocks, while others described a sudden drop in temperature and feelings of overwhelming dread. The legend of the vanishing crew became a part of Alcatraz's dark lore, and the island remained a place of fascination and fear. The spirits of Alcatraz, it seemed, were not content with the past. They continued to reach out, their presence felt by those who dared to explore the remnants of their suffering. The echoes of Alcatraz's haunted past lingered in every shadow and whisper, a chilling reminder of the torment that had once pervaded the island. After the mysterious disappearance of Mark Davis and his team, Alcatraz Island became even more notorious for its eerie happenings. Despite the extensive searches and investigations, the team was never found, and the case grew cold. However, the island's dark reputation continued to attract those who were drawn to its ghostly lore. In the early 1990s, a new group of paranormal investigators, led by Lisa Warren, arrived on the island. Lisa was a determined investigator with a reputation for solving some of the most perplexing paranormal mysteries. She had been following the story of the missing crew and was intent on uncovering the truth behind their disappearance. Lisa and her team arrived on a foggy evening, much like the one when Mark's team vanished. They set up their equipment and began their investigation, with a focus on cell block D and the solitary confinement cells, areas with a particularly dark history. As the night progressed, Lisa's team experienced the usual array of strange phenomena: unexplained cold spots, eerie whispers, and the occasional glimpse of shadowy figures. Despite these occurrences, Lisa remained focused, determined to find answers. Around midnight, Lisa and her colleague Tom decided to conduct a detailed investigation of the solitary confinement cells. They set up cameras and audio equipment, then carefully examined each cell, looking for anything that might shed light on the island's mysteries. As they approached one of the cells, Lisa noticed something peculiar. The temperature dropped sharply, and the air grew heavy with an oppressive weight. The sound of muffled cries seemed to come from the walls themselves, a sound that was both haunting and familiar. Lisa's heart raced as she recognized the cries from the recordings of Mark's team. Suddenly, their equipment began to malfunction. Cameras flickered, and the EVP recorder picked up a chilling message: "They are coming back." The message was followed by a series of ominous thuds, as if someone or something was moving through the corridors. Lisa and Tom decided to investigate further, following the sounds to the far end of the cell block. They noticed that the walls seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, and the feeling of being watched grew stronger. The whispers became louder, and the sense of dread was almost palpable. In a hidden corner of cell block D, they discovered something that took their breath away. Behind a loose brick in one of the walls, they found an old, rusted metal box. Inside the box were personal items belonging to the missing crew: photographs, a notebook with their names, and a strange, weathered talisman. The talisman bore an inscription in faded ink that read, The lost must find their own way. As Lisa examined the items, Tom noticed a chilling presence in the room. The temperature dropped rapidly, and an ethereal mist began to form around them. It was then that they saw the figures of Mark and his team, their faces etched with expressions of fear and confusion. The apparitions seemed to be trapped, unable to move beyond the confines of the cell block. Lisa attempted to communicate with them, asking if they needed help or if there was a way to release them from their torment. The figures responded with silent pleas and gestures toward the talisman in the metal box. Realizing that the talisman might hold the key to resolving the mystery, Lisa carefully examined it. She found an intricate pattern on its surface, and as she traced her fingers over the design, she felt a surge of energy. The figures of the missing crew grew clearer, and their expressions seemed to convey a mix of relief and desperation. In a final attempt to help, Lisa and Tom performed a ritual to honor the spirits and help them find peace. They placed the talisman in the center of the cell block, lit candles, and recited a prayer for the souls trapped within. As they did so, the apparitions of the missing crew began to fade, their expressions softening as if they were finally finding rest. The temperature returned to normal, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The team packed up their equipment, feeling a profound sense of relief and closure. They left the island with a renewed sense of purpose and a deep respect for the spirits that had been trapped there. The story of the vanishing crew and the resolution of their spirits became a significant part of Alcatraz's lore. The tale served as a haunting reminder of the island's dark past and the restless souls who continued to linger within its walls. Though the island remained a place of fascination and fear, the resolution brought a sense of peace to both the living and the dead. The echoes of Alcatraz's tortured history would forever resonate in the hearts of those who dared to explore its ghostly confines. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.